For this recipe, we're going to do goulash Deb's way. We're going to start off by boiling some water and adding the noodles to get them prepared for the goulash. I'm putting the lid on here so that I can show you what happens if you boil noodles with the lid on. In just a minute, it's going to start exploding. It'll almost always boil over if you leave a lid on when you're cooking noodles, so make sure you leave the lid off. We're going to boil these for 8 minutes so that they're just underdone, like al dente. Then drain them and leave them setting aside, and we'll make the rest of the goulash in the same pan that we used for the noodles. I didn't add any oil for this because hamburger is greasy enough as it is, so just fry up some hamburger. We have about a pound in here. I'm breaking up the chunks so that it's all kind of about the same size maybe. Now we're going to peel an onion. I noticed this onion had a bad spot on it, so I peeled it to see what it might look like on the inside and cut it in half. And you can see there's a bad spot in it, in the middle. Right there, it's a rotten layer. And you can see that it's black. It's not the right color. That's what tipped me off that it was going to be a bad onion after I cut into it. Sometimes when you peel the onion, the outside may be bad, but the inside's okay. On this one, all the other layers are fine, but that layer was no good. I just chose to use a different onion anyway. When you cut up an onion, make sure you leave the root end of it on there, and that'll decrease the amount of tears you get when you're cutting it. And I'm cutting it at an angle all the way through it and then cutting it down, and that leaves it in small chunks by the time you're finished, rather than having to cut it twice. You see all the grease in the hamburger. We're going to drain that off before we add the onions. Although fat is good in your diet, animal fat is not good. We shouldn't eat the fat of the animal. So I'm going to drain it off. Sometimes I just put a paper towel in the pan and soak up the oil. And sometimes I actually pour it into a colander. This time I did, so you can see how much fat was in there. Now if you make homemade soap, you can save this and use it to make a bar of soap later. That's what they used originally to make soap out of, was their animal grease and lye. So now I'm adding the onions. I'm going to fry them up, stirring often until they start turning clear. Notice how they've cleared up. They're not as bright white anymore. I'm going to add some minced garlic. Maybe about a teaspoon, or a clove of garlic if it's fresh. It is stronger if it's fresh. And I'm going to add some frozen mixed vegetables. Looks like corn, kidney beans, some red pepper, some green pepper. It had onions in it too, but I like a lot of onions in my cooking. Onions are very high in vitamin C. So when you use them a lot in your cooking, you do increase the amount of vitamin C content in your diet overall. I'm going to stir them up so they can spread out and start thawing and cooking up. I'm going to add the tomato sauce, just 1 can. You can add more if you want it soupier, more like a stew. Boy, isn't that looking good. I added some Italian seasonings and some sage. I like to put Italian seasonings in everything because it's very antibacterial, antiviral, has a lot of good mineral quality to it, and it tastes good in everything, almost. I'm adding the diced tomatoes, and my can opener wouldn't open the can, so I had to get creative. Watch out for that tomato monster. Now I'm going to stir it up again. You don't have to stir it this often, I just am. That way it doesn't, because the burner is still turned on, so I don't want it to stick to the bottom, so I'm stirring it often, just with the addition of everything. And now it's time for the noodles, and I didn't measure them, I just put in how much I thought was going to be enough to be just perfect. Probably I'd say about 4 cups, 4 or 5 cups cooked. But that all depends on how moist you want it and where your blood sugar lies as to whether you can have more noodles or less noodles. So this is where you can take different body chemistries into account. And if somebody has a higher sugar, you can leave noodles out of theirs. And if somebody has a lower sugar, you can add the noodles in. And there you go. We have a batch of goulash. My way.